self thought, it is often taken for granted. It is not at all a natural line of thought that a person has to fulfill a specific task in life based on being a woman or a man. The term gender role was first used by John Money and colleagues in 1954 during the course of a study of intersex individuals, and speaks of a social role encompassing a range of behaviors and attitudes that are generally considered acceptable, appropriate, or desirable for a person based on that person's biological or perceived sex. The importance of mainstream gender in all walks of life cannot be overemphasized. This is not just to make sure that women get a chance to give expression to their creativity and abilities, but is essential for the balanced development of any society. In fact, when considering women in science, it is even truer. Research is a highly creative and individualistic activity, and each person makes his or her unique contribution. The process of scientific development, innovation, and discovery can only benefit from diversity, gender being just one component. Also, given the fact that women are 50% of humanity, their intellectual potential is something that we can ill afford to ignore. I am your host, Maria Anna van Driel, and you are listening to The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. And this week I'm speaking with Anandita Badra, who is a Global Young Academy co-chair and associate professor at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, about the position of the female scientist in India and the importance of STEM subjects.
Anandita, how are you doing? All the way from India.
Well, we just ended the semester. I finished submitting my grades at 2 a.m. in the morning, so I'm feeling a bit relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is always a busy time.
Okay,
so
cool.
Today is like no grading anymore.
Well, I'm sorry for my appearance at this moment, but last night I'm looking very terrible tired. But last night it was about 2:30 when I went to sleep. And this morning my alarm clock went off at about 8 o'clock. I was thinking to myself, okay, you know what? I give myself 5 minutes to wake up properly. And then when I opened my eyes, it was 10:30, and I was going, oh my God, no, I have to go online. So I was going stressy, and my dogs had to go out, and etc., etc. So I'm happy that this is audio only, that this is radio, that listeners cannot see how tired I am at this moment. Okay. Dr. Badra, welcome to the show of The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. As I mentioned in your intro, you are an associate professor in the Department of Biological Science at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. But you corrected me, and the name of the institute has to be the Biological Science at Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Calcutta. Do I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, absolutely.
What is this institute doing? Where is it aiming its scientific arrows at?
So let me give you a bit of the background. There
Yes.
are 7 ISOs, as we call them,
Yes.
IISERs in
Yes.
India. The first two started together in 2006 in Kolkata and Pune. Kolkata is in the east of India, Pune is in the west of India. And
Okay.
these were, envisaged as premier institutions of science education, where students, right after their high school, they entered through a very competitive process. So the idea was, very, very bright students from across the country, they can opt to go to any of these ISers. And then there, we have a 5-year integrated bachelor's and master's program. And every ISer has a slight variation, but the idea is when they come in the first year, they don't
Mhm.
pick majors. They do undergraduate degrees, courses where they do physics, chemistry, biology, maths. In some of the ISOs, including ours, we also have earth sciences. They also get
Mhm.
a bit of, humanities courses like philosophy of science. They have English, communicative English, and then the students can take all the streams of science and get an interdisciplinary flavor of science. And then they can choose which three of the sciences they like the most and do a pre-major for 1 year. And then from these three, they pick one subject as major and they join a department as a major student. And then 2 more years of the major subject. And the final year is an MS dissertation project, which they can do
Mhm.
in either Kolkata or they can do in an institute outside. And many of our students now are going to labs in Europe, labs in the US, labs in other parts of the country to explore and
Yeah.
do their MS thesis projects. And then at the end of 5 years, they get a dual degree BS and MS. And so it's like, we do not draw boundaries between the disciplines of science. Students can take any combination of subjects. And from the very beginning, they do summer internships, both inside or outside the institute. And they also have lab courses, which have a research component added to these from the third year onwards. So the idea was that you get brilliant students and get them in the methods of science from the very beginning. Do not wait for them to, do a very basic bachelor's and then choose master's in a stream, which is the norm in India otherwise. But from the beginning, they kind of get a flavor of research. They can walk into the labs at any point of time. Even first year students can go and tell somebody, I want to hang around in your lab when I don't have classes, and the faculty will always agree. So they kind of get exposed to research from the beginning. And especially in ISER Kolkata, we are very proud that, in the last 13 years that we have been existing, and the first batch graduated in 2011. So since then, we have had students who have gone and joined PhD programs in all the top universities across the world. So we call it our academic footprint. And the academic footprint of ISER Kolkata is like really spreading into different countries of the world. So that's the idea that, science, education, and research go hand in hand.
13 years, that is very young for an institute when it comes down to teaching students their choice of scientific field. Now you are an Indian scientist, a female scientist. Do you see that in this young institute you are teaching, you are an associate professor at, do you see, a balanced between male and female students, or is there an overall and female or an overall and male students?
I wouldn't say it's very balanced. Unfortunately, we strive to have a balance, but then depends a lot on the applications and the grades. So overall, if you look at the country, then in the sciences there are it's not really a 50-50 ratio. So in ISER Kolkata too, we see that there are fewer girls than there are boys who come in. But
Mm.
again, if you look at the PhD levels, we actually have more girls in the biological sciences department than in the other departments. So there is a skew. So if you look at the countrywide average, even then, I think currently it's around 50-50 if you look at all streams of undergrad, which includes the
Mhm.
humanities, commerce, everything. But in the sciences and engineering, there is still a male heavy sex ratio. Also, I think in ISERs, it's not just that it's science, but also, that just after high school, they have to come and live on campus. It's a hostel based system. And
Oh,
in the Indian society, it might be that not all families are okay with their girls going and living in hostels for months at a stretch. So that might be one of the constraints. But overall,
oh,
if I look at the intake from the applications, that does not change much. But at the level of applications itself, we do not have a 1:1 ratio as of now.
why do you think that it is that certain families say, okay, no, I want to have my daughter or daughters at home instead of living on a campus? Why do you think that it is? Is that only in India or in the region where you are teaching, or is that all over India?
It is actually more in other regions of India than in my region. I come from the state of West Bengal, which where Kolkata also is, and this state and some other states have been more outward looking always. So actually, if you go to any institution across the country, or even in many universities across the world, then you will find people from West Bengal as students there, faculty there. So we have been more outward looking, but there are some states which are a little more conservative, where they would not be very comfortable with girls going away from home for 5 years and living in the hostels.
Mm,
And also there is this notion, still unfortunately in the society that girls should not be studying science; they should study humanities. Science is a more male-dominated subject. So we keep having these discussions that why is it that representation of women in science is lower than women in other streams, and there is a
mm.
socio-cultural aspect to this, definitely.
You have studied your own scientific field compared to what people are thinking now about females studying science, compared to your moments in high school, in the university. Is there a difference in there? And how did you experience your time of study?
Well, I must say that I have been one of those privileged people. I belong to a very typical middle class family where education was considered to be the thing for a kid,
Okay.
I was never brought up as a girl. I was just brought up as a
Oh.
child. I was the eldest in my family of a joint family. I was like, my parents had two daughters and they insisted, your only job in life is to study and, be something. So I
Mm,
was never put under I have never been into the kitchen all my years that I've been home. I was not allowed to enter the kitchen. So of course there were times when I was told, that you also need to maybe, tidy up your room a bit. After all, you're a girl, but then mostly it was like, doesn't matter whether you're a girl or a boy. You need to study. You need to get a job. You need to, make your space in the world. Don't expect that we are going to get you married.
mm,
Unfortunately, many girls don't have that kind of support in their families. They are expected to, learn household work. Even today, I have seen this in among, younger girls in some families. This is like the girl's job and the boy's job. This kind of discriminations happen. Second thing
mm,
is, I went to an all-girls school. And, in India, there are still girls' schools and boys' schools. So I have gone to an all-girls school where we were not treated as girls. You play, go and get your hands dirty in the ground, and you do everything yourself. And
yeah.
our teachers were like, okay, no, doesn't matter. You're a girl. You better get to do this. You better learn to do this. So we have got a very all-round education where again we were not treated as girls, but we were
Mm,
given this idea that you have to grow up and be responsible people, not just
yes.
women, right? So,
Yes.
and then when I went for my undergrad years, that was a very different experience for me because for the first time I was in this college, which was actually in a region in the city, in the same city that I lived, but it was quite far from home. I had to travel a lot. And for the first time, I was meeting people who have come from these traditional backgrounds. And in my class, I still remember I walked into the class and sat down in the first place I saw, and there was a hushed silence. And later I was told, you are sitting on the side of the boys. And I was like, what nonsense is that? What
Yeah.
do you mean side of the boys? And I got to
Mm.
know that in the class, boys sit together and girls sit together. And I was completely shocked because though I went to a girls' school, I was brought up in a big family with cousins all around. And I grew up in a neighborhood which was dominated by boys. So all my childhood friends were boys. And I would be playing outside with them all the time, fighting hand to hand with them. So,
Oh,
and
okay.
my mother never told me, you're a girl, you shouldn't be doing this, right? And then
Okay.
in college, people
Whenever
told me, girl side, boy.
whenever I will meet you in person, I'm not going to in a fist fight with you. I think I'm going to lose there. But
So
your
I
role
think
model.
cultural shock was quite big actually because girl side and boy side, and I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to sit with the boys because you're telling me not to do this. So and
Yeah,
I
and
could
then
see
you are
that
going to
there was
do
a lot of
so.
resistance. Exactly, but then it's also like you also get to see that not everybody has the same perception of the world and what is wrong and what is right, and that is I think a very nice learning experience. So during my PhD, actually, I did my PhD with a male supervisor, Professor Raghavendra Gadatkar at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And we
Mm.
had, again, at my time, the lab was full of girls for some reason, and at that point of time. And we had a very vibrant lab, we uh, hung around together. And my supervisor was a person who was so supportive. He still is. I mean, I consider him my mentor. And whenever people say, horrible stories about supervisor student dynamics and discrimination and all kinds of harassment, I always think back to my PhD days and I always think, I think it was a huge piece of luck that I ended up doing my PhD with him because he has been the person who has been my role model. I still try to emulate him in anything I do in science. Every time I have a question, every time I'm in trouble or I need advice, all I need to do is send him an email or a WhatsApp message or pick up my phone and call him depending on what time of the day it is. So he's always there. His family is like my family. His wife is a friend, and we keep talking. So it's a very different experience, I think. But when I came to IISER Kolkata as a faculty now, then I again saw a different world because there you start realizing that there are people who do not consider men and women to be equal. There are people who think, okay, she's a woman, she should not be speaking out on all matters, and issues like this, which in IISc had never even occurred to be a concern.
So you have a very active study time behind you. You got your PhD. Today you are teaching. You are an associate professor at the IISER in India. But not only that, recently I have read you have taken up the position of co-chair in the organization of Global Young Academy. Well, first of all, congratulations, because that is a very, very important function to have. But what is your Global Young Academy?
Thank you. So the Global Young Academy is a global body which is kind of an organization which tries to bring together researchers, young researchers from across the world. Our philosophy is that we want to give a voice to young scientists in matters of policy, in matters of science and society interface. We would like to network with many organizations which work in the science and society interface. We would like to put forth the opinions of young scientists, young researchers in places which matter, because often when decisions about the future of, say, science and education and sustainability, big issues in society are being taken, then often it is really the senior people whose opinion is always being asked. But often we, the early career researchers, become the major stakeholders in the receiving end of it, because we are the ones who are going to stay in this field for the next 20 or 30 years when the policy is being designed. But then nobody seeks opinion from young people because everybody thinks you need a lot of gray hair to be wise. But this is the whole point, that we want to give a voice to young scientists. But beyond that, we also bring together people from all kinds of fields with a lot of innovative ideas. We do a lot of education outreach, science outreach. We try to engage in different kinds of projects and science diplomacy. On women in science, we have a very active women in science group. We have a group which tries to look at diversity, inclusivity. We have a rainbow group which tries to do that. So we are working on a large diversity of projects with inputs from experts in different fields. And all of these experts are early and mid-career scientists. So that is what the Global Young Academy is. We have 200 active members and then a large network of alumni. And the good thing about the GYA is, unlike other academies where you once become a fellow or a member, you remain a fellow all your life. But the GYA remains young by giving memberships for only 5 years through a very, very competitive process. Once we finish our 5 years, we become alumni. We still remain connected, but we are not active voting members. So the academy never ages. The members can grow up and they can move on, but the GYA remains a young body.
5 years, and then somebody else is putting in his or her opinions and view on the world. I assume that Global Young Academy is also addressing STEM subjects. And why is it that STEM subjects are this important to the attention of young people all over the world?
Well, for a lot of issues. Take, for example, the current pandemic that we are all experiencing. A lot of inputs need to come from the STEM subjects. We are all looking forward to the vaccine working. And behind this are scientists. And you don't just need one kind of scientist. You need virologists, you need epidemiologists, mathematicians, cell biologists, all kinds of people who have to work together in synergy to solve one major problem. Similarly, another big issue that the world is facing is, of course, climate change. And we are all talking about it. Climate change is something that needs a lot of understanding, that needs a lot of work. And again, we need inputs from different kinds of sciences to handle this major threat to the future of the world. So there are, it's not just big issues which need inputs from the sciences. I think one of the things that many of our societies and our politicians across the world don't realize is science or the sciences. They are considered to be these, individual units. Okay, you do biology, you do chemistry, you do mathematics, but science actually does not have boundaries. So, we might not all speak the same language in terms of, our equations and our whatever jargon. But then all scientists speak the language of science, which is based on logic and, testable hypothesis and accepting the results of the experiment and, proving things by doing an exercise. So these are very, very simple kind of philosophies that we have in all sciences. And that is something which we need to apply to life in general. Unfortunately, science as a way of life is something that we lack as a society. Some societies, some regions have it a little more, some regions have it a little less. But there's a lot of disconnect between science as a practice and science as a way of life. So even a lot of scientists, practicing scientists, would, take up science as a career option, as a job. But in their personal lives, often you would see that they are not really scientists in their mind. I can give you one example which is very prevalent in India from personal experience. A lot of people believe in horoscopes, okay? Finally, the day you were born, somebody says some constellation is in some part of the sky, or some star is in some point of the sky, and that apparently decides your future, your character, or your health, or whatnot. Complete
Mhm.
nonsense if you think about it logically. That star might be a dead star which was dead 1 million years ago. Unfortunately, I know of scientists who try to match horoscopes when their children are getting married and say, they don't know this match cannot happen because the stars don't say so. How ridiculous can that be? Two
It is a bit
people want
funny,
to get
yes.
married. They like each other, but you think that something written on a piece of paper based on some position of some constellation that some random guy has come up with, that is more important. So that is where science is not a way of life. You are a scientist by profession. That does not mean that you are a scientist at heart or in your mind. So this is where I think the importance of science lies. That does not matter whether you are a historian, whether you are an author writing whatever crime fiction, or you are a priest. Whether you think like a scientist is what matters really, and that is what we need to have. The society thinking logically. Only then people will stop saying, "How does it matter that the Amazon is burning? I don't live there." To get to that point, we really need science as a way of life.
It almost sounds like that certain scientists do have this belief in what is unexplained yet. So don't you think that for instance, astronomy should, well, be explored more, where horoscopes probably is a base or basic thing for somebody to say, okay, I want to know for real what's in the stars.
People are often confused between astronomy and astrology, where
Mm.
astrologers do not really study the planets and the stars. They just have some methods by which they do some calculations based on some almanac which says this is where this planet should be, and based on that they do this. But astronomy is of course a very very fascinating field of science where people are doing a lot of work to understand the planets, the stars. There's a lot of solar science going on. There's a lot of exploration about even exoplanets, about life on other planets. So there is hard research going on in astronomy.
Is this also a topic that is being taught at the Institute of Science Education and Research at Calcutta?
Yes, we have in the physics department associated with that, and then we also have a center for space sciences. It's called SETI. It's a very, very active department center, and they specialize in space sciences and solar sciences, and they are engaged even in the LIGO project, which is a global project which tries to understand the gravitational forces. So it's a very very active center, and they are doing fascinating work recently, actually predicting what I'm not an expert, but basically they are doing a lot of studies on solar eclipses, and they are doing a lot of predictive modeling, and they're showing that their model matches the actual eclipse when it happens. So the solar flares, how they will be distributed, because that's all based on energy, and based on data they are doing predictive modeling to predict the patterns that you would be observing in upcoming solar eclipses. So recently there was an eclipse, and their prediction, they did a predictive model, and it matched quite a bit with what they finally observed. So observational data, mathematical models, simulations, three kinds of things put together to do a lot of hardcore astronomy. That's something which is ongoing. But people who do astronomy never like to talk to astrologers. So one thing,
Oh,
my husband is a physicist, and he often says that why doesn't someone just do an experiment, that if you could have astrologers often read palms, they do a lot of palmistry. So they say, he often says, why don't people take images of people's hands who have died, and then do a blind experiment, giving these to astrologers and asking them to read the palm and say what is the fate of this person, without telling them that the person has died. But of course, not everybody would be ready to allow that to be done with their relatives. So it's a social
No.
problem. So, yeah, but as a thought exercise, that works.
Okay, that is a creepy experiment. Sorry to say so. You say you are not an expert in astronomy. Well, I have read your website at researchgate.net. There we can read that your research, your study, and your teachings are focused on animal behavior or humanities, I believe, or is it human behaviors?
No, no, I study dogs, and this is not humanities. This is biology. So it's
Oh, sorry.
part of ecology. So I try to understand how. So in India we have a lot of stray dogs, or technically we call them free-ranging dogs. So dogs
Oh,
which live
okay.
on streets, which are free animals, not under the control of humans, but they also interact with humans a lot. And we have such populations of dogs in most countries of the global south. And they are a very, very fascinating system because they can tell us how dogs existed before we took them in as pets and started breeding them and started producing, specific breeds to our liking. Dogs existed, as cohabitants in the human environment. So that's what I try to understand: how dogs live their lives, what are their family structures, how do they maintain their territories, what kind of parental care behavior a mother shows, how do they interact with humans, how good are dogs at understanding human gestures without having any formal training. So these are the kinds of questions that I explore.
Well, yeah, I have one of your articles in one of my magazines. I read in there, and there was I think it was about the dog lab. I read your article, and something that I have learned, and I've never forgot that from your article, is why dogs sniff at food or at anything. And in your article, and correct me if I'm incorrect here, that dogs sniff for proteins.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, I never knew that. I always thought that they were sniffing if it was tasty or that it was greasy or sweet enough or that, but never for proteins. You were also in your article explaining how dogs are walking through trash and sniffing everywhere, and I was going, oh my God, yeah, that is so logic. They are sniffing for proteins. So that was a long time still in my mind. But your dog lab, there is also a website. What can we find on your website?
Well, you will find the lab members, which are my students. You will find the various projects that we are involved in, which I was just talking about, like parental care, territorial behavior, dog human interactions, and how we are trying to finally understand the evolution of the dog human relationship. You will find all our publications listed there. You will find the various activities that the Dog Lab does outside of research, so a lot of outreach. We go to schools, we talk to children about the fascinating world of animals. I love talking to kids, so I keep doing a lot of school outreach.
You say we. You can find our articles and blog articles and research. Do you mean that you are writing these articles or doing these research studyings together with your husband, who is also a professor at the
No, no,
IISR?
no, 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 no. I
Oh,
always say we because the real workforce are the students, the PhD students, the master students who do the most of the hard work, and I guide them. So I never
okay.
call it my research. I always think it's our research and it's our lab.
So your husband, like I
Yes,
just said, is also a professor at the IISER Institute in India.
yes.
But besides science and besides you and your husband teaching at the institute, you both also have a tremendous love for theater, and you have worked together in a play. Was this play linked to scientific research in social behavior, or was it more like an expression of you and your husband's creativity?
So just let me clarify a bit. So my husband and I have been working together on plays for a long time, and we actually have a professional theater group. So in India, we have this concept of people coming together and forming a club kind of structure, and they can do professional theater. So the two of us run a group called Mukhosh, and
Hmm.
we have done several plays together. He typically writes and also directs most of them, and we both act. So I think what you have seen was the first play that we did in Kolkata, which was called Brishti Finally. And that was just a story where both of us were acting. But recently, we have done a play called The Uncertainty of Principles. And this is a bilingual play. So we have an English version of it and a Bengali version of it. And both
Okay.
of these we have performed in different institutes. It was actually commissioned for a conference on science and society initially, the English version, and then we have multiple shows of this. And this is actually a play which holds a mirror to both science and society. So it is about, again, it's written by him, and it's about, how people have their own prejudices and how scientists often sit on this in a lofty pedestal, thinking they are so special, and they don't talk
Mm.
to people in the society, and how that each of them have their problems. And it's a very interesting dialogue between this God man and the scientist. Eventually, that's kind of the climax. And
Mm.
this entire play is has been accepted very interestingly by both general audience who think it's very dramatic, and they like this tussle between the scientist and the godman. On the other hand, when we perform it in institutions, people say, "Oh wow, the scientist gave it back to the godman." But there are two ways that people perceive, but it's a socially relevant play to kind of hold a mirror to both the scientists, saying, you need to come down from your pedestal and talk to the people and make them see your perspective. Don't treat them in this high-handed manner. And also to people in the common society, saying, just don't accept everything at face value. Try to look at things with some logic behind it. So this is something that we are very happy with, because this gives us the opportunity to do something where we are in the interface of science and society, using something that we both enjoy doing, which is theater.
Science seems to, well, not to be ruled out of people's lives, not out of theater, not out of the lives of a dog, even. Um, and everywhere you look, science is lurking around the corner and tapping you on the shoulder. Whoa, hey, hey, there's something more than the things that you only see. Besides you being a scientist, and besides your husband being a scientist, you have also two lovely children. Do you think that what your husband and you are teaching at the institute is influencing your children to make a choice, a career choice in science, for instance?
So when my son was, I think, like 6, 7 or 8 years old, one day he came back and he was very angry because in the class, it's typical. Teachers will say, "Okay, tell me what you want to be when you grow up." And
Hmm.
he stood up in class and said, "I want to be a scientist." And
Okay.
then apparently the teacher said, "No, you can't be a scientist. You can be a professor." And he said, "No, no, I want to be a scientist. My parents are scientists." And
Yes.
everybody laughed at him and said, "Oh, he wants to be a scientist, because in the school, which is not in a big city, the perception of a scientist does not really exist. Because again,
Mm.
because people don't see scientists, people see professors, people see doctors, people don't ever get to visit labs. So, where do they know what a scientist does, what a scientist looks like? And this is where I think it's the responsibility of scientists to come out and talk to people, talk to kids, tell them what science is all about.
So,
Pardon?
what is a scientist?
Well, technically, a scientist is somebody who's doing science research, But I think anybody who thinks like a scientist is a scientist. You know,
Okay.
you and I are scientists. My son is a scientist when he is being logical. So it does. You don't have to have a degree in science to be a scientist at heart. So it depends on whether you've done a PhD in a science discipline and become a scientist on paper, or whether you're a scientist in practice. So to me, these are very different when I see people around me. So coming back to my kids, our daughter wants to be a teacher. So she teaches all the time. She teaches her dolls and she teaches her soft toys all the time. She even has a blackboard. So she wants to be a teacher. Earlier, she used to say, I only want to teach kids. Now she says, I want to be a teacher like you in a college. So that's her, she's 9. And our son, he used to always say he wants to be a scientist and he wants to study animals because he's a big animal lover. But he has now a second career choice in mind, which probably might become his first. He wants to be a chef. And he is 13 and he's just turned 14 actually, and he is quite good at cooking. He can cook whole meals. Surprised us on our anniversary, on my birthday. So he is good at that. He enjoys cooking, and I'm hoping he'll be a chef. We are trying to inculcate in them rather than aspiring to become scientists themselves. I would be very happy if they grow up into reasoning, logical human beings. I think that's important. We never tell them you should get top marks in class, or you should come first in class, and you should get full marks in science. No, but we always try to tell them that science and maths are important subjects. If you want to grow up and do anything in life, you need to know a bit of maths. You need to know a bit of science, and that's fine. But finally, at the end of the day, do whatever makes you happy. I think that's most important.
It is well important to people to stand up, young people to stand up and let their voice hear. And the moment they say, I want to become, well, they can fill it in for themselves. But for instance, in science, what do you think that could be done for female scientists, for young girls and young women who say, I want to become a scientist because this is such an interesting topic and I want to dive into that and explore it. I want to make my career out of it. What do you think should be or could be done for these young people so they can be treated more equally to their male colleagues?
Depends at which level we are talking about. Firstly, I think more and more social exposure so that parents stop discriminating between their children. And in societies like ours, I think in the developing world altogether, that's something very important. Secondly, I think it's teachers who have a huge responsibility, especially in schools. If girls are told, these are the games that girls should play and these are the games that boys should play. If you're a boy, you should go for the cricket class. If you're a girl, you should go for the dance class. There begins the discrimination. Parents. My son used to play with, kitchen sets when he was 1 year old, and often people, visiting us would say, "Oh, he's a boy. Give him cars. Give him building blocks." So people would give him building blocks, and he would, the Lego set. He would use them as vegetables and meat and stuff, and cook them in his kitchen set. I mean, that was what the Legos were for him. Our daughter used to love doing jigsaw puzzles. Our son hated it. And it's fine. I mean, he loves doing art. Our daughter hates it when she has an art exam. She's like near to tears. I have to draw. Oh my God. It's fine. And this idea, girls should be drawing and the boys should be out playing football just doesn't work. And we, I think, as parents need to be responsible enough to not inculcate these, stereotypes, gender stereotypes in our children. That I think the start is there. The girls should be told you can be anything you want to be. Nobody's stopping you. And often it helps to have nice role models. So if schools do activities in which they tell about lives of interesting women to girl students and boy students. The boys should also be brought up with this notion that we and girls are equal. We are not better, or they are not, they don't need to be protected and guarded by us, but needed to be treated equally. So having nice role models, show them a movie about Marie Curie and show them what she achieved. So that, that can actually make people dream big. So often I would see, there are, in textbooks, people will have role models. Name a scientist, they'll say Einstein. Nobody names Marie Curie. So that's where, we need to work, that as a society, we need to give them role models. I used to do this activity with we have done it in different countries now. We tell kids, draw a scientist. And most of them draw scientists that look like Einstein. And I was actually shocked that even girls don't draw women scientists. They don't think of a scientist as a woman. They're typically a man in a white lab coat with a test tube in their hand. That's what a scientist is supposed to look like. And science is bigger than that, right? So I think it's very important to give more exposure and give them role models that they can look up to.
I was thinking about how difficult it has to be, or how difficult it is to draw a female scientist, because some women are wearing their hair so that you cannot draw that. So it's much easier to draw a little fuzzy head that looks like Einstein. But Anandita, as we are also talking to young people, of course, because you are the co-chair of Global Young Academy, promoting these STEM projects, STEM subjects, and how that boys and girls are equal in finding their own career. You can do, as you say, you can do and can be anything that you want. Do you have any additional advice for young people who want to become a scientist, who want to explore the myriad opportunities science have to offer, including the STEM subjects?
Ask a lot of questions, never be satisfied, be curious, and read lots of books. And when I say read lots of books, I don't just mean textbooks. Often kids will say, oh, I read, encyclopedia. Yeah, fine. Go ahead and read an encyclopedia if you like to. Read a dictionary, learn new words. But read anything and everything. Read magazines, read storybooks, read Harry Potter, read, Arthur Conan Doyle, read The Blind Watchmaker. Keep reading and read different genres, because to be a good scientist, you need to be creative. And creativity can come at multiple levels, and creativity needs imagination, for which you need exposure. So if you want to do science, if you want to be a good scientist, first be creative. And by that, I mean creative in your ideas, which comes with more and more exposure. And of course, never stop asking questions.
Reading books, even the dictionary, converting your brain into an almost creative machine, and of course having fun. That is one of the paths that you as a young person can take, or almost should take, in creativity to become that scientist that you want to be. Anandita, I like to thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. But before we close out, can you tell us where we can find more information about your research, the organization Global Young Academy, your career as an actress, and for people how to contact you when they have questions for you?
Sure. You could visit us at the Global Young Academy webpage, which is just globalyoungacademy.net. And you can find all the information about the GYA. You can visit my Dog Lab homepage. You can just search by my name and you will find it. It's easy to find, the Dog Lab Isaac Kolkata. And you can visit either Kolkata homepage, which is again IISER Kolkata, and you can just find all the information that you want there. So these are there, and my email ID is abhadra at iiserkol.ac.in. It's there in the IISER Kolkata website. Again, you can just shoot off an email to me. I'm there on Facebook. I'm there on Twitter. My Twitter handle is abhadra7. So you can reach me on social media if you like.
Thank you all for tuning in this week on The Next Truth, where science and myth meet. Make sure to visit our website, www.nexttruth.com. That is nexttruth, all in one word.com. And let us know what you think about our podcast. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we would appreciate a rating on our website in the section The Next Truth Podcasts. Or if you would simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us too. I am Maria Anna van Driel with The Next Truth. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.